In this episode, we discuss the succession of the 14th Dalai Lama and its significance for the Tibetan people. We also look into a 200 rupee scam that took the police 35 years to crack. But we begin today with Punjab, where a controversial bill is currently in the works. Hi, I'm Ichha Sharma, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. For the past few weeks, the AAP-led government in Punjab has been exploring options to introduce a law that would propose capital punishment for those found guilty of sacrilege.
Sacrilege is considered as an injury, damage or desecration to Guru Granth Sahib, Bhagavad Gita, Holy Quran and the Holy Bible.
That's the Indian Express's Kanchan Vasdev, who reports on Punjab for the paper.
This is a definition given by the Punjab government with the intention to hurt the religious feelings of the people. So it is also about injuring or defiling place of worship with an intent to insult the religion of any class. So Punjab government has been arguing that the Guru Granth Sahib is considered a living Guru of Sikhs because they say it is their 11th Guru. 10 Gurus were their live Gurus and then this is also the 11th Guru. But it's not a human being. So hence the harshest punishment is only fair in the crime against the holy book. This is what they have been saying. This is the definition.
Now, over the past few years, almost every government in Punjab has tried to bring in stricter laws on sacrilege, but this current proposal is the harshest one yet. So to understand exactly what the AAP government is proposing and why the issue is so controversial, my colleague Shashank Bhargava speaks with Kanchan in the segment.
Kanchan, could you tell us since when has sacrilege been such an emotive and politically charged issue in Punjab?
Actually, in Punjab, it has always been an emotive issue because Punjabis have seen trouble-torn era of terrorism, When it started, then there was injuries to the cows, they were murdered, cows were murdered, their legs were cut and they were placed in the temples. This is how the early days of terrorism in Punjab began. It comes from there. But lately, it hit the headlines in October 2015. When pages from Guru Granth Sahib were found torn in Bargadi, it's a small place in Punjab. Then the Sikhs had sat on a dharna at Bhaibal Kala, another place. Subsequent to this, the police had opened fire at the agitators because they had been sitting there protesting and forcing the government to arrest those accused. But the police were not able to arrest those accused at that time because those pages were found from a street and then they couldn't find anyone. The investigations, they take their own time. So then these people are sitting on a dharna. So one midnight, the police opened fire so that, these people were dispersed. Because as I told you that Punjab has already faced trouble-torn days of militancy under a separatist movement. So the government of the day that time did not want the issue to raise its head again because it was snowballing into a huge, political and religious controversy. So after the firing took place, it became a huge issue for the government to handle, the Shiromani Akali Dal and BJP government at a time. So they faced quite a backlash and a huge anger, from the people. So it happened so that the government was rooted out of power in 2017 elections. And then it is believed that the anger still prevails. And even in 2022 assembly election in the state, the Shiromani Akali Dal was reduced to only 3 MLAs in an assembly of 117. So for all the governments, it's considered a very emotive issue.
Right, and we understand that governments after that have been proposing stricter and stricter laws for this issue. But talk about what the AAP government is proposing now.
See, in most likelihood, they want death penalty for the crime. This is what they have been talking about. But since there is some opposition from within the party and some political opponents are also saying that it's going to be a draconian law. So debate is on whether they should propose a life imprisonment or capital punishment for these crimes of sacrilege. So the opinion within the party is also divided. Chief Minister Bhagwant Mann has said it so many times that speaking during the public functions that there should be harshest punishment for sacrilege. Several other leaders in the party, they are however against the capital punishment, calling it a retrogressive step. They are saying the world will mock at us, they will frown at us and, it's not going to look good at all and AAP would be frowned upon for wrong reasons. That would be everywhere. So they also say that it's very harsh and the government should think of other ways of punishment.
And could you talk about how what they're proposing now differs from the existing laws around this issue?
See, under the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, the punishment of sacrilege is only imprisonment for up to 3 years, a fine of 1,000 rupees, or both. So the section 299 of BNS, it addresses deliberate and malicious acts intended to outrage religious feelings by insulting a religion or its beliefs. This is what it says. The offense is also cognizable, non-bailable and triable by any magistrate. But now Punjab is thinking that it's too late.
And we understand that back in 2018, when the Congress government was in power, they had also proposed a strict law on sacrilege, one that included life imprisonment as punishment. Could you tell us what happened to that proposal?
So the then government, it sent the bill to the President of India for assent. Because the governor can't do it, the governor has to send it to the President of India. So the President of India sends it back to the Union Ministry of Home for comment. So when it went to the Union Ministry of Home, they sent the bill back to Punjab government saying that it was a very harsh punishment, and for the sacrilege of holy books and religious places, this kind of punishment should not be there. So the state then wrote back to the center saying that Guru Granth Sahib again is considered a live guru and hence its injury, damage called for stricter laws. And then recently, during the regime of the incumbent government, the center has again returned the bill to the state government saying that these should be in line with the new system under BNS and BNSS system.
And you earlier mentioned, how there are concerns even within the party about how this law could be misused, especially considering it is proposing what is really the ultimate punishment. And we have often seen in the past, that governments take up such charged issues either to mobilize their base or to give in to specific demands. Is that the case here as well?
See, for Punjab, this is an issue which is like a political issue also and an emotive issue also. There are overtones. But for the government to react immediately, it's about an activist who has climbed atop a BSNL tower, which is 400 feet tall. It's in Samana, small town near Patiala. So he's been up there since October last year. His name is Gurjeet Singh Khalsa and he's 45 years old. He's an ex-serviceman, that's what I'm told. And he's on fast and to death since January now. And he's seeking a law against sacrilege. So there are concerns that something may not happen to him, as it is difficult to reach the top of the tower and takes about 45 minutes for a person to reach there. And then he's over there. We have very harsh winter, then we had very harsh summer, and then it's going to rain also. The monsoons have already hit. So then they want him to come down, but he's saying that he's resolute and he won't come down. And the police is not able to bring him down because I told you that it's a narrow staircase where only one person can climb, and it's difficult to get him down forcibly also. So they are fearing that if something happens to him, then it would be a repeat of 2015 sacrilege event, that took place when the firing was done at the agitators who were protesting against the sacrilege. So this is the immediate, push.
And Kanchan, what happens next here? Has the government formed a draft already?
They have prepared a draft. They are saying that it is still with the Advocate General Maninderjeet Singh Bedi. He's taking legal opinion also, consulting it with other legal luminaries so that it is enacted and does not get stalled like earlier bills. And the debate has also been considered that there are some voices which are not in favor of death penalty. So the government has already called a special session of Vidhan Sabha on July 10th and 11th. Finance Minister Harpal Chima was saying yesterday that if they are not ready with the draft on 10th and 11th, then they could even extend the session for a few days so that, they can bring the bill.
And next we turn our attention to the 14th Dalai Lama, who celebrated his 90th birthday last week. And with that, the question of who will succeed him and how that successor will be chosen is once again in the global spotlight. For over 66 years, the Dalai Lama, born Tenzin Gyatso in 1935, has been the spiritual and cultural face of the Tibetan struggle for autonomy. And now as he turns 90, a familiar tug-of-war has resurfaced between the Tibetan government in exile and the Chinese government over who has the authority to name his successor. Just last week, the Dalai Lama said that the continuation of the institution would take place under some kind of a framework. That statement carries weight because back in 2011, he said that when he turned 90, he would consult the Tibetan High Lamas and the Tibetan people to reevaluate whether the institution of Dalai Lama should even continue. To understand why this moment matters, the Indian Express's Varinder Bhatia breaks down the Dalai Lama's succession and what's at stake for Tibetans and for India. Verinder, we know that Dalai Lama was originally seen as a purely spiritual leader. However, over the years, his role has also evolved into a more political one. So, could you discuss how significant this evolution has been?
Yeah, the role of Dalai Lama has evolved significantly over the centuries, transitioning from a powerful political religious monarch to a global spiritual leader and a symbol of peace these days. We got to go to a little bit of history. Actually, the institution of Dalai Lama began in 15th century, but it was the fifth Dalai Lama in the 17th century who established the dual role as both the spiritual leader of Tibetan Buddhism and the political head of Tibet. For centuries, the Dalai Lama wielded both religious authority and secular power, governing Tibet with the help of monastic and lay officials. It was in 1959, after China's occupation of Tibet and the failed Tibetan uprising, that the 14th Dalai Lama, who's the current Dalai Lama, he fled to India and eventually established a government in exile in Dharamshala in Himachal Pradesh. So it was that point where, from a traditional ruler in exile, he shifted to being a global advocate for Tibetan autonomy, human rights, and nonviolence, and gained worldwide recognition. And then comes another significant year, that was in 2011, when the Dalai Lama formally retired from his political leadership, transferring the authority of an elected leader of the Central Tibetan Administration, which is the current setup also, which we also call in the layman's language as Tibetan government in exile. And the head of the Central Tibetan Administration is known as Sikyong, so which is called as a secular ruler in Tibetan. So this marked a historic shift, separating church and state for the first time in Tibetan history and modernizing Tibetan government in exile. So today, the Dalai Lama is primarily seen as a spiritual teacher, a moral leader, and an ambassador for peace, compassion, and secular ethics. And these days, he speaks on issues like mindfulness, education, environmentalism, religious harmony, and has been appealing to people across cultures and faiths to practice Buddhism and compassion.
Right, and the current Dalai Lama recently turned 90. So, talk about why is this such a crucial moment when it comes to the question of his succession?
See, as Dalai Lama is turning old, and many Tibetans and supporters of Tibetan Buddhism, they worry about what will happen after the current Dalai Lama passes. So, frankly, his 90th birthday, if we talk about Tibetans, it's not only just a celebration, but it's also a moment of reflection and preparation for a future without his direct guidance, and a call to protect Tibetan spiritual and cultural continuity. It was about a decade ago when the Dalai Lama had made a public statement saying that he would decide on his reincarnation plans when he turns 90, and which is why everybody had been waiting for the July 6, 2025, the day when he actually turned 90 years old. There had been lots of debates and uncertainty, to which the Dalai Lama had also been referring to in the past, saying that he would in fact leave it up to the Tibetan people that if they actually want the institution of the Dalai Lama to continue. But now, recently, on his 90th birthday, the Tibetans, they had began celebrations from June 30th onwards. It was on July 2nd when he made his intentions clear and released a statement in which he said that the institution of Dalai Lama will continue. He's the 14th Dalai Lama now. He has made it clear that there will be 15th Dalai Lama and the 16th Dalai Lama and so on.
So, how is the reincarnation of a Dalai Lama usually identified? Like, what is a traditional process?
The process of identifying the reincarnation of the Dalai Lama is actually a traditional and spiritual practice which is rooted in Tibetan Buddhism. It involves a combination of religious rituals, signs, and interpretations carried out by senior monks and spiritual leaders. For instance, after the death of the Dalai Lama, high lamas and monks observe for spiritual signs. They may include some visions or dreams by the respected lamas, unusual cloud formations, or the direction the body faces after death. And then earlier, what it used to, when they were in Tibet, so senior monks may visit a sacred lake, which was called as Lamo Lasso in Tibet. And it was believed that meditating at this lake could reveal visions or symbols pointing to the location or characteristics of the next reincarnation. Then, usually, a search party is sent to the region indicated by the visions. They look for a boy born around the time of the previous Dalai Lama's death who shows unusual qualities or spiritual awareness. Then, I mean, of course, there would be more potential candidates. So all of them are tested to see if they can recognize items that belong to the previous Dalai Lama, such as his personal belongings among a group of similar objects. And correct recognition is taken as a very, very strong sign. And if one of those potential candidates, if the child passes the test, then the senior monks and high-ranking religious figures confirm the choice. Earlier, it used to be the final confirmation involved consulting the golden urn lottery kind of a method introduced in the Qing dynasty. But that turned out to be controversial and had not been always used in the reincarnation. So the current Dalai Lama has said that there is a trust in his private office, which is called Ganden Fordering Trust. And that trust is led by a very senior monk and a couple of more senior Tibetan people. And he has clarified that this would be Ganden Fordering Trust, which is working in his private office, that will be solely responsible for taking further the reincarnation process.
And Varinder, we understand that even this process has become increasingly contentious, with China insisting that it has the authority to choose the next Dalai Lama. So can you explain why China has inserted itself into this process, and also what it stands to gain by controlling this narrative around his reincarnation?
Actually, China's interest in controlling the reincarnation of the Dalai Lama is deeply rooted in political, cultural, and strategic motivations. China had been calling the current Dalai Lama a separatist, a political exile, and had been accusing him of disturbing the law and order situation inside Tibet and inside China. Like earlier, the Dalai Lama used to be both a spiritual and political leader for Tibetans. In fact, many still believe him to be the political leader, although he had already denounced his political role way back in 2011. But yet his influence extends beyond religion, symbolizing Tibetan identity, a unity and resistance to Chinese rule. So by asserting this authority over the reincarnation process, China is aiming to diminish the Dalai Lama's influence and ensure that any future successor is loyal to the Chinese Communist Party and not the Tibetan independence movement. So since 1950s, actually, Beijing had worked to assimilate Tibetan culture and suppress separatist sentiments. So controlling the reincarnation of the Dalai Lama is also part of this broader strategy. And the current Dalai Lama, of course, had been for long criticizing Chinese policies in Tibet and continues to remain a global advocate for Tibetan autonomy. And his eventual passing could trigger unrest or renewed calls for independence if the succession is actually contested. And China has been arguing that the reincarnation is governed by historical precedents and must follow Chinese law. And it has been insisting that it has the authority to approve the next Dalai Lama, referencing an imperial tradition that was used in the past to select higher-ranking Tibetan lamas. But Tibetan Buddhists who have been living outside China, they widely reject this claim and believe that only religious leaders, not political authorities, can identify the reincarnations. So it's China's desire to control the Dalai Lama's reincarnation, and because it reflects strategic effort to secure political dominance in Tibet and suppress any sorts of dissent and shape the future of Tibetan Buddhism to align with the state's interests.
And lastly, Varinder, we know that the Dalai Lama's succession isn't just a Tibetan issue. It affects Buddhist communities across the Himalayas. So how has it turned into a geopolitical flashpoint? And also, what does it mean for India?
See, when Dalai Lama escaped out of Tibet in March 1959, and he entered India, and Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru was the prime minister at that time. So he granted political asylum to the Dalai Lama. for which he not only faced a lot of resentment by the opposition leaders, but also from within his own cabinet colleagues who were not in favor that Dalai Lama should be granted a political asylum because it could trigger more differences between India and China. And eventually it also became one of the reasons that laid the foundation for the Sino-India War in 1962. And currently, yes, the Dalai Lama's reincarnation has also become a geopolitical flashpoint because it touches on religion, national identity, and definitely international power struggles, especially between China and pro-Tibet countries like India and United States. In fact, Western countries, especially the US, have also passed laws supporting the Tibetan rights to choose their religious leaders without any Chinese interference. So this is obviously angered Beijing, which views that such actions, in fact, foreign meddling in its internal affairs. And the reincarnation is no longer only a spiritual matter because it has been converted into a high-stakes political battle over the future of Tibet, religious freedom, and definitely geopolitical influence in Asia.
And in the end, we talk about a 200 rupees scam that took the Karnataka police 35 years to solve. In Karnataka's Uttara Kannada district, police recently solved their oldest pending case dating back to 1990. The case involved the cheating of a student, Venkatesh Mahadev Vaidya, who was defrauded of Rs 200 by a man promising him a government job. As reported by the Indian Express's Kiran Parasar, in 1990, Vaidya, then a 20-year-old BCom student from Sirsi, paid the amount to B. Keshva Murthy Rao, who was considered influential in the area. After receiving the money, Rao disappeared, and Vaidya filed a police complaint. The Rs 200, a significant sum at the time, had been borrowed by Vaidya from an elderly acquaintance. Over the decades, Vaidya moved on. He completed his education and later retired as chief manager of the State Bank of India in Bengaluru. Periodically, he was contacted by the police whenever a new officer took charge at the Sirsi Rural Police Station, but the case remained unsolved. Parasar reports that earlier this year, Police Inspector Manjunath Gowda, who had taken charge of the station 2 months prior, reviewed the cold case files and found this particular case noteworthy. He leveraged his prior work experience in Kundapura, where Rao had lived in the past, and gathered information about his whereabouts. The breakthrough came in the last week of June, when a police constable using a courier delivery ruse contacted Rao and arranged to meet him under the pretext of collecting a package. Rao, now 72 years old and living alone in Bengaluru, was taken into custody and brought to Sirsi. During the investigation, police learned that Rao had become a Kannada activist in Bengaluru and had participated in protests alongside known leaders. Vaidya was contacted by the police earlier this month and informed about the arrest. During court proceedings, Rao apologized to Vaidya, who chose to forgive him considering his age and circumstances. Vaidya withdrew the case on humanitarian grounds. Following this, the court ordered the closure of the matter. Parasar states that Inspector Gowda noted that the resolution of this 35-year-old case was important not just for procedural closure, but also for the police station, where it had remained an unresolved entry for decades. You were listening to Three Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar and produced by Shashank, Bhargava and me, Ichha Sharma. If you like the show, do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcast. You can also recommend it to someone you think may like it, with a friend or in your family. This is the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Podcast or write to us at podcast@indianexpress.com.